Hey everybody, it's the Sheriff Treefitty and we're here again with another GLC set review. Today we're looking at Surging Sparks, which is coming out in a couple weeks. So we're going to take a look at all of, not all of the cards, but cards I think are worth talking about. We'll go through the entire set and then we will go over my ranking of each type for GLC. So first up, as always, is Grass. One thing of note is this execute that can evolve itself with its attack the very first turn of the game. So you can use this going first. So this is worth noting. There is another execute, the one that pulls from the discard, that I think is also quite strong, but this one is one of note if you have a good executor that you want to play. But I don't think this one is very good. We'll talk about it. This executor has 1 energy, 60 times damage, flip a coin for each energy attached to both active Pokemon, and it does 60 damage for each heads. I'm not too big of a fan of coin flips, so I think this is just a little too inconsistent. Maybe late game when they have a bunch of energy and you have a Venusaur, this could do a lot of damage, but the whole point is to use it with this precocious evolution early on, right? So I don't think it's that great. I'm gonna give it a 2. Next up is Vivillon. Yeah. So Vivillon is a stage 2 with for a single colorless. For each of your bench Pokemon, search your deck for a card that evolves from that Pokemon and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. So I think this is pretty great, especially in a grass deck, right, where you're playing, with some builds, you're playing like 4 stage 2s, right? And so if you are able to get this out very early, then I think this can be very strong to set up your board for the game. Of course, this is like an early game attack. You're not going to use this late game, so that is there are pros and cons to using this. I'm going to give Vivillon a 4 if you can set it up. It is very, very strong. Next up is the Shinotic with the Calming Light ability. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon asleep. So if you're making a special condition grass deck, this could be pretty good. But not too impactful otherwise. But I'll give Shinotic a 3 if that is the archetype you're playing. Next is this is a Rude Sandstorm, which for 3 grass energy, 80 damage, and you may put all energy attached to this Pokemon back into your hand for 80 more. So 160 for 3 is very good. There is the other Zarude that most people favor to play, and I still think that is very strong, but I think this is a pretty solid alternative, and you get to preserve that energy if this thing is going to get knocked out, which is pretty great. So I will give Zarude a 3. Yeah, just a solid choice. And then there's Wo-Chen. So for 2 energy, it does 20 damage, but if there are 3 or fewer cards in your deck, this attack also does 120 damage to 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So if you can cycle through your deck like hecka fast, then this card can literally just win you a game, right? Just take out 2 support Pokemon on the bench for 2 prizes. I don't know how easy it is to do that with a grass deck. Uh, it's not like Lost Zone where you can very easily get through your entire deck within a couple turns. But 120 to 2 bench is definitely not something to scoff at. So if you can pull this off, this guy is great. I'm gonna give it a 4 because that attack is just so good if you can pull it off, but you probably do have to build around this. And that'll do it for grass. Next we've got fire. We've got this Ninetales, which I know a lot of people are excited about. For a single fire, you do 50 and then 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So a bit more snipe in fire, a little bit of spread. It's a small amount of damage, but I guess if you are building like a snipe spread deck, then that's gonna happen. You can boost the number with like a muscle band or something if you really wanted to, and knock out some basics. So there is that. But yeah, just a bit of snipe. So I'll give Ninetales a 3 in that archetype. We've got a couple other snipe cards we're going to talk about. So next is one of the Tauros cards. There's a few of these in the set. For 3 fire, or 2 with Charizard. If your opponent's active Pokemon is a stage 1, then this does 90 more damage. So 180 if you're up against a stage 1 deck. This is good, right? If you're playing stage 1s, but there are certain decks where this is not going to happen because all their attackers are like basics, so like sometimes it won't matter. But in other cases, I'm trying to think of decks that play a lot of stage 1 attackers, and all I can really think of right now is like metal, but that doesn't matter anyway because you're hitting it for weakness. So I don't know. It's nice. I guess it's a tech card essentially. But most of the time, I think attackers right now, a lot of them are basics. So, but I'll give Tauros a 2, probably a 3, just depending on the situation. Okay. So next is let's see, Skeledirge, which is a stage 2 and has the ability Unaware, prevent all effects of attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon, and then for 2 fire or 1 fire with Charizard, you do 60 and then 20 more for each bench Pokemon. So pretty solid attack, very cheap honestly, especially with Charizard. 180 is tanky. So I think this guy is a pretty solid attacker. I'm gonna give him a 3, just because he's a stage 2, and it's in fire, like the least consistent deck right now, I feel like. So, spoiler alert. But yeah, solid attacker. Definitely, I think the best Skeledirge for GLC. Then we have an interesting Armarouge, which 3 fire or 2 with Charizard. Discard all fire energy from this Pokemon, and it does 180 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, right? So here's some more of that snipe, right? So you have this and like the Ninetales, the Ho-Oh that can snipe, and then like the Heatmore, right? And you've got like this snipe spread deck, right? So 180 to anything is very great. That's KOing like any support Pokemon, which is fantastic. You do have to discard all energy, but we can get that back, I think, pretty easily with fire, with blacksmith and welder and whatnot. So, oh, and the stadium. Uh, so yeah, I think this guy is pretty solid. I'm gonna give Armourouge a 4. Okay, then we have Gouging Fire, which for 3 energy, 100 damage. But if your opponent has 4 or fewer prize cards remaining, this does 70 more damage. So Mewtwo in Psychic is very popular, right? Very solid card, played in most traditional Psychic builds. And that is 3 or fewer prize cards. And so this one is actually, you can use this even earlier than that, and it does 10 more damage than the Mewtwo. So it is in fire, so it is less consistent that way. But 170 for 3 is very good. So I'm gonna give Gouging Fire a 4 as well. And then I actually missed one. There's this Scent to Scorch that for a single fire does 130, which is quite good, but this also does 30 damage to each of your bench Pokemon. So that is a pretty big downside, but extremely cheap attack for 130. That's KOing like most basics and a lot of stage 1s, right? So which sometimes fire needs a really cheap attacker. So I think this guy is pretty great in some situations. The damage to your bench kind of sucks, but I digress. Scent to Scorch is going to be a 3 for me. And that is it for fire. Let's go on to water with this Tauros is trash, by the way. 2 energy, 30 damage. You can put 2 energy attached to your opponent's active stage 2 into their hand. That is not good enough at all. Let's talk about this Walrein. So stage 2 for a single water does 60 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, Pokemon that have 2 or less energy attached cannot attack. That is pretty great. And then 170 for 2 water, which is very doable, obviously, in water. And then you do 52 itself. But 170 is great. That's KOing a bunch of stuff. And Frigid Fangs, that attack is quite annoying to deal with. But there is another Walrein, shout out to my student who has this cooking up, that blocks trainers, and I think that one is, if you build around that card, can actually be pretty devastating. And so I think one might not be better than the other. I do think this guy is pretty solid, though. I'm going to give him a 3. I think this guy is pretty good, especially in like the cheaper water deck that tries that does not accelerate very much energy. I think this guy could fit in that, so that it is of note. So yeah, he's a 3. So let's talk about this Quackavolt, right? So has the ability up tempo, and this is on a stage 2, right? You must put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck to use this ability. Once during your turn, you may draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. So so it's basically Octillery. You do get to push a little bit more with this card because you have to put a card on the bottom of your deck so you do get to see one more card. Um, this is a stage 2, and I was thinking in what scenario would I ever play this over Octillery, and there was only a single time I could think of that, and that is if you are playing a single strike water deck, because then you can play this for the draw and then play the single strike, or rapid strike, sorry, rapid strike Octillery that searches for any rapid strike card, right? And so you play that and this, and voila, you have the best of both worlds. So I think this card is great for that deck specifically. Otherwise, I think you just play the draw Octillery. So I'll give Quackable a 4 actually for that deck. Otherwise, just play the other Octillery. Now we have this Satitan, which has 180 HP. He's huge, stage 1. And the ability, it takes 30 less damage from attacks. So it essentially has 210. 150 for 4 energy is a little expensive. The other Satitan, the special energy one, does more for less, right? But you slap like a pot helmet on this thing and it's taking 60 less damage with 180 HP. It take 80 less with the stadium, right? So this guy could be pretty tanky. I think it's an actually pretty solid Titan, especially if you're not playing the special Titan. Maybe you're playing this in like a hydro pump build. I think this guy is pretty solid. So I'm gonna give Titan a 4. Then we have this Chen Pao, which has the ability when you play this from your hand onto your bench, you may discard a stadium and play. It's an okay ability if you want to get rid of your opponent's stadium. But then 120 for 3 and put an energy attached to this Pokemon into your hand. This guy is a little underwhelming. 120 for 3 is like fine. A lot of basics though have 130 HP, which is really concerning. Right, like I feel like a lot of the time 130 is now the number to break, not 120. It's still okay, but I really wish this said 130, and I think it would be a lot better. But it's fine. So I'm gonna give Chen Pao a 3. And that'll do it for water. Now we have lightning. First up is this Magneton, which once during your turn you may attach up to 3 basic energy cards from your discard pile to your lightning Pokemon in any way that you like. If you use this ability, this Pokemon is knocked out. So we've seen these knockout abilities before, and they have been successful. And being able to just accelerate 3 energy into play is so good. Like, I think like powering up, like Regieleki multiple times is easier. Powering up Electivire again is a lot easier. And so this acceleration is very, very good, I think. I'm going to give Magneton a 4. Very, very strong. Yeah. Okay, and then we have this Tapu Koko. Hello. What did I just do? Sorry. Tapu Koko. 1 energy, search your deck for up to 2 lightning Pokemon. put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. It's an okay attack, going like beginning attack. A little bit of setup. But then for 3 lightning energy, 90, and if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent, and does 90 more. So 180 for 3. I don't know if I ever want to play this over the spread Tapu Koko, unless I just really don't care about spread in a lightning deck. But I think spread is the best way to play lightning, so I don't know. This guy is solid, but you can have like the exact same attack essentially on your Luxray, right? That can come into play for free. So, this guy is fine though. He's solid, so I'm gonna give him a 3. Then there's this Kilowatt Roll, which stage 1. 3 energy does 160, very solid. And then you move all energy from this Pokemon to your bench Pokemon in any way that you like, so you get to preserve that energy and it stays on board, which I think is very strong. So I think this guy is very solid, so I'm going to give him a 3. And that'll do it for Lightning. Okay, Psychic, here we go. They always get so much crap. Let's see. First up is Togekiss, okay? Has the ability, this is stage 2 Wonder Kiss ability. When your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out, flip a coin. If heads, take 1 more prize card. This cannot stack, which doesn't matter. But when I first read this, I thought it was just from attacks from Togekiss, but no, this is any attack that you use. You can flip a coin and take 1 more prize card. I think this thing is absolutely nuts, right? Just like 50% of the time, right? You're taking an extra prize card, just because. So I think this Togekiss is a 5. I think this is just absurd, right? And if you really need to, 140 for 3 is fine. That's KOing basics, a lot of stage 1s, right? So I think this card is nuts and definitely worth playing on a stage 2. So yeah, Togekiss is a 5. Next is Azumarill. Its ability doesn't matter, but for 4 psychic energy, it does 230 and 52 itself, and that's very expensive unless you are playing the Gardevoir that doubles your psychic energy. So this, if you're playing that, then this is 230 for 2 energy, which is very, very good. So if you're playing that Gardevoir, I definitely think you play this in that deck. So very, very good card. I'm going to give Azumarill a 4 for that archetype. We do have this Smoochum. Free retreat, 30 HP, baby Pokemon, right? For a free attack, search your deck for up to 2 basic psychic energy cards and attach them to your bench Pokemon. So I think this is very solid. I actually love this in a Garbodor deck alongside the Shining Mew. I think that Shining Mew is a little... there's pros and cons, right? Shining Mew requires an energy, but it doesn't have to be basic energy that it accelerates, right? But I think this is still very solid, especially as like a first turn attack. So I'm gonna give Smoochum a 4. I think this little fella is quite solid in that regard. So we have the Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf line. I do want to talk about this Uxie. For 1 psychic, put 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon. I think this is very great spread. I'm currently playing the Meloetta that spreads damage in my Lost Zone deck, and you have to flip coins for that. I think I'm replacing this with that because you just guarantee the 2. Um, and uh, yeah, I think this is a very solid chip early on spread attack. So I'm gonna give Uxie a 4. Then we have this Mesprit. So it accelerates energy from your hand to your Pokemon for 1 attack. You're probably not using that very much. I guess you can early on or in a pinch. But 2 Psychic, 160, very good, but you have to have Uxie and Azelf on your bench, or else this does nothing. So to play this, you have to heavily lean into the trio. Pros and cons, but 160 for 2 is very, very great. So Mesprit is going to get a 3 from me. And they're all searchable with Buddy Poffin. That is one thing to know. So, and then there's this Azelf. 2 energy, 10 plus. This attack does 10 more damage for each damage counter on all of your opponent's Pokemon. So you can just use this after Uxie. So that's pretty good. It's still 2 energy. But yeah, it's still solid for spread if you use something like Uxie first. So yeah, I'm gonna give Azelf a 3 as well. Okay. Then there is this Cophagregus, which has a single energy, put 6 damage counters on each Pokemon that has an ability, both yours and your opponent. I think this is very, very great in something like Gardevoir, or Garbodor. Or just really a Psychic deck that does not rely on abilities. But yeah, 6 to spread is very, very strong. I think this is a very, very good card. Every single one of your opponent's support Pokemon is going to have an ability, right? So if you can attack twice with this thing, is very good. So I'm going to give this Cophagregus a 4. Very solid. One thing to note though, if you play this in Garbodor, you do put damage on Garbodor, which actually kind of sucks. So I don't know about that, but still, 6 spread to everything essentially is very, very good. Okay, and that is I think that's everything I want to talk about for Psychic. Yeah, that's all I want to talk about. Okay, so fighting. First up, we have, let's see, I'm going to go a little out of order on my list. So Tauros, 3 fighting, 90 damage, but if the defending Pokemon is a basic, it can't attack during your opponent's next turn, so that's pretty obnoxious. One thing to note, they do have to play around that, so I'm going to give this Tauros a 3. Next, let's talk about this Donphan. So for 3 energy, it does 120, and then you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. This takes 100 less damage, so it essentially has 250. In an acceleration fighting build, I think this can be really good, but if you're not playing acceleration, then this is just too expensive to pull off. So I'll give this Donphan a 3. Next, we have this Gastrodon. As long as this Pokemon is on your bench, bench stage 2 Pokemon have no abilities. So this is a very good card, right? This turns off like Gallade, Gardevoir, Dragonite, just all the best support stage 2 Pokemon, right? And some stage 2 attackers. So, Excalibur gets rid of that. Inteleon. So, very, very good ability on a stage 1. If you're playing a more low to the ground fighting deck, I think this is great. So, Gastrodon is going to get a 4 from me. Okay, let's talk about, let's see, Graplocked, which for 3 energy it does 130, whatever, right, on a stage 1. But if this Pokemon has any damage counters on it, you can use this attack for a single fighting energy. So 130 for 1 energy is very, very good, and it is very easy to put damage on yourself with fighting with things like Earthquake, Donphan. So I think this is a very great attacker. So I'm going to give Graplocked a 4 as well. Okay. And then we have this Koraidon, which has the attack 2 colorless, does 30 damage, but if one of your other ancient Pokemon used an attack during your last turn, this does 150 more. So 180 for 2, very, very good. You can use a double colorless if you really want. But there are some pretty solid fighting ancient Pokemon like Slitherwings that you're probably playing anyway, so I think this guy is pretty solid. So I'm gonna give him a 3. I think it's pretty doable to pull off that attack. There's like no dark in this set, but I will talk about Grafaiai. First attack, 1 energy, attach up to 3 energy cards from your opponent's discard pile to their Pokemon in any way you like. I guess this can kind of disrupt your opponent. Oops, sorry. You can like put all of their energy onto like their Malamar or their Flaffy or something, right? To disrupt like their discard energy acceleration. So I think that's pretty good. But then 2 dark, 40 times. This attack does 40 damage, 40 damage for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So kind of has that synergy with the first attack. Most of the time, your opponent is gonna have probably like 3-4 energy in play. I feel like that's not hard to ask for. So this is doing like 120. Maybe 160 sometimes. So I think this Grafaiai is actually pretty solid. I'm going to give him a 3. Okay, let's talk about this Dugtrio, right? This Alolan Dugtrio. For 0 energy, you can do 120 damage. But if you don't have exactly 3 cards in your hand, this attack does nothing. That is annoying that you have to think about your hand a lot with this, but 120 for nothing is very good in my opinion. So I think Alolan Dugtrio is gonna get a 3 from me. And then we have Iron Crown, which for 2 energy, if your opponent has 3 or more bench Pokemon, this attack does 80 more damage. So 120 if they have 3 or more benched. That's very easy to ask for. So pretty cheap, solid attacker. So I'm gonna give Iron Crown a 4, which I feel like metal sometimes needs a cheap attacker. So okay, then we have Dragon, which I'm kind of disappointed with all the Dragon in this set. Just saying. Let me just rant a little bit. But we'll talk about Dialga first. For 1 energy, search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle them, and put them on top in any order. I guess you could pair that with like your Cloak or your like Tatsu or something if you need. But then Psychic, Metal Colorless, you do 160, which is fine, I guess. If you're playing those energy types, maybe with the Necrozma, Ultra Necrozma, then this has synergy with that. So this card isn't terrible, but not super great either. I'm gonna give it a 3. I think this Palkia is not very good for 2 energy, 40 damage. This attack does 40 damage for each basic energy attached to this Pokemon. If this had any energy, it would be way, way better. But the fact that it has to be basic and you can't use your double dragon, this is not nearly as good. So I think Palkia is a 2, maybe a 1. Okay, we do have this Flapple. I do think the other Flapple is better, but this one is okay. For 1 energy, this attack does 20 damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. There is a spread archetype for Dragon, and I think you can play this in that deck. But I think the other Flapple is just better, so I'm going to give this guy a 2. There's the Appleton. 2 energy, 130. This does 20 to itself, is fine. 2 energy, 50. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't attack. So that is a little annoying for them. But I don't think you'd have to play. I mean, you could play this and your Flapple, but you'd have to choose one or the over, and I think the Applin or the Flapple is just better. So this Appleton is gonna get a 2 from me as well. Okay, next up we have Eternatus, which its first attack doesn't matter, but its second attack 3 energy, 230, and you discard a Stadium in play. If you can't, this does nothing, but 3 energy for 230 is very, very good. You can put a double dragon on this and then accelerate a fire. It is possible to do this in 1 turn, so I think you have to use a double dragon with this guy, but 230 is very strong, so I'll give Eternatus a 3, and that'll do it for Dragon, unfortunately. Okay, not much for colorless. I'll point out this Kecleon has the ability Expert Hider. If any damage is done to this Pokemon by attacks, flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. That's good. But for 2 energy, this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. I don't think this is this is just too weak. It's not enough damage. So Kecleon is gonna get a 2. And then we do have this Braviary, which for 2 energy, switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active, and this does 40 damage to the new active. So you can pick something off if they retreated and you need to just finish it off or something. And then 120 for 3 is like fine, but not ideal. So I think this guy is very situational, so I'm going to give him a 2. And that'll do it for the Pokemon. Now let's go through all the trainers. We have some more berries, which is a good tech if you're playing against that type a lot. If not, this is a dead card in your deck. So another berry gets a 2, as well as the Culber berry. This also gets a 2, but it kind of just depends on what your league is playing. So I guess you can tech against it that way. So. Then we have Call Bell, so you can use this card only if you go second and only on your first turn. But you get to search your deck for a supporter card and reveal it and put it into your hand. So that's pretty good, right? If you start this, but if you don't, then it's just a dead card in your deck, like VIP Pass. But VIP Pass is slightly, you'll be able to use that slightly more because that's on your first or second turn going first. This is a very high risk, high reward card. I'll give it a 3 because the effect is just so good, but you're hardly gonna be using this card. So we have Chill Teaser Toy. That is a name. You can use this card only if you go second and only on your first turn. Put an energy attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon into their hand. So it really just slows your opponent down. But this doesn't have a reward nearly as good as the Bell. So I'm going to give Chill Teaser Toy a 1. Clement's Quick Wit is a supporter where you heal 60 from each of your lightning Pokemon. So in the mirror spread, this is great. Anything else, this is terrible. So Clement is gonna get a 2. Your lightning Pokemon are usually just too squishy. Reprint of Counter Gain is great. Serrano is a supporter. Search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon EX. That does not apply here. Deduction Kit. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them back in any order, or shuffle them and put them at the bottom of your deck. I think this is solid if you have... I actually like this in Lost Zone quite a bit. I don't know if you play this in anything else though. But it just adds like a little bit of consistency, I guess, if you need it. So I'll give it a 3. Okay, next up we have Dragon Elixir, which is an item where you heal 60 damage from your active Dragon Pokemon, so just a free 60 heal with no downsides. So that's pretty good. You can pair this with like Crystal Cave, right? And then you're healing 90, right? So that's actually pretty great. I like this a lot, especially with like a Lux Caped Garchomp or something. And that thing is sticking around for a few turns. So I think this card is very solid. Definitely the best thing Dragon got. So I'm going to give this a 4. Next is Drasna. Shuffle your hand into your deck, flip a coin. If heads, you draw 8. If tails, you draw 3. That is Pretty big risk. Um, so I'm gonna give Drasna a 2. It's just very risky. Because shuffle draw 3 is just not good at all, right? Okay, we have Drayton. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck. You may reveal a Pokemon and a trainer card you find there and put them into your hand. This is okay, I guess, if you're really needing a specific Pokemon. And I guess you could find like an Evo Soda or something off of the top. But I don't know, I feel like I would just rather play like a draw supporter or something. But this isn't terrible, so I'll give Drayton a 3. We have Dusk Ball, which look at the bottom 7 cards of your deck, and you may reveal a Pokemon you find there and put it into your hand. So this is literally Great Ball, but for the bottom of your deck. So if you had to if you or your opponent played a Marnie or an Iono or something, and you know that there is a Pokemon you need on the bottom of your deck, this can be pretty good. Otherwise, it's gonna be the exact same as a Great Ball, right? If you don't know. I actually would argue that this is better than a Great Ball, because at worst, it's doing the exact same thing as a Great Ball. But you can retrieve a Pokemon you need if you know it's there, right? So the thing is with Dusk Ball, you just have the knowledge, right, of whether or not something is on the bottom. So that is an interesting thing to think about. So I'll give Dusk Ball a 3, a solid ball card. Okay, we have this Gravity Mountain, which each stage 2 Pokemon in play gets minus 30 HP. That is a pretty good effect if you are a more low to the ground deck and you're worried about certain stage 2s. Funnily enough, you could play this with like Dusknoir to knock itself out and put 130 on one of your opponent's stage 2, like Gallade or Garchomp or Dragonite or something. And with this, that'll actually knock it out, which is funny. But yeah, this is an okay stadium if you're worried about stage 2, so I'll give it a 3. We have Jasmine's Gaze, which is a supporter where during your opponent's next turn, all of your Pokemon take 30 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. So you just are tanky no matter what. So that is interesting if you have more of a tanky build, but using your supporter for this, I don't know if you want to do that, but if you can pull it off, then it can be good. So I'll give Jasmine's Gaze a 3. Next is Lucia's Appeal. Switch in one of your opponent's benched basic Pokemon to the active. If you do, the new active Pokemon is now confused. This is a great form of Gust if you're worried about one of their like evolving Pokemon setting up, or if you're worried about one of their attackers on the bench. This is great. This is just another form of Gust. So solid card. I'll give Lucia's Appeal a 4. Then we have Lively Stadium. Okay, each basic Pokemon in play gets plus 30 HP. I think this card is ridiculous in decks in like colorless. I think this is like broken and colorless. Um, so yeah, just very, very great. I'm gonna give Lively Stadium a 4. Yeah, if you're not worried about your opponent having more HP as well, this card is great. Oops. Meddling Memo is an item where your opponent counts the cards in their hand, shuffle those cards, and puts them at the bottom of their deck. If they do, they draw that many cards. This is a pretty good disruption card, I would say. Usually an opponent will like play down their hand, right? As much as they can. So I think this is a pretty good form of disruption. Like if you can nab like, if they have like 3 cards in their hand, where they're like sitting on a supporter to play next turn, I think this could be very good. So I'm gonna give the Meddling Memo a 3. Another berry, again, if you're worried about this type a bunch, then play one of these berries. If not, it's a dead card. We have Surfer, which switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. If you do, draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. I think this is pretty good. It's, you know, extremely similar to Bird Keeper. It's has similar traits to Tate and Liza. I think this is just another solid switch out supporter. I actually think this is a very, very solid switch out supporter, so I'm gonna give Surfer a 4. We have this TM Machine Fluorite, where for 3 separate energies you discard all energy and heal all from your Terra Pokemon. That does not matter. Terra Orb does not matter. We have Time. What the heck is this card? I haven't even read this card. Tell your opponent the name of a Pokemon in your hand and put that Pokemon face down in front of you. Your opponent guesses the Pokemon's HP and then you reveal it. If your opponent guessed right, they draw 4 cards. If they guess wrong, you draw 4 cards. Then return the Pokemon to your hand. This card is hilarious. What the freak? This is a 5. This card is a 5. Play this in every single deck. Okay, and then no special energy, and that is going to do it for the list. We're going to go over to our types now, which nothing has really changed. We had a lot of interesting cards this set. I think there's a lot to play around with, but I actually don't think the types change very much. I might put Lightning here. It's a little bit better with that Magneton, but yeah, I still feel good about this list. So yeah, I still think colorless, psychic, and dark are gonna be your best types. And then in A we have lightning, dragon, water, and grass. I think all of those are extremely even. In B I have fighting. It just lacks some support. I might put metal is good. I don't know if I'd put metal in B. I don't know. Sometimes it feels clunky, but and then fire I just think is one of the most inconsistent types. And then you have fairy down here because fairy. So yeah, that is gonna do it for our Surging Sparks GLC set review. If there were any Pokemon that I didn't mention, bring it up in the comments and I will rate them. If you disagree with any of my stuff, then tell me in the comments as well, and we can have that discussion. Until next time, I will see you guys, and thanks for watching.